Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for your time, for coming to join us today for this webinar, this ICSV, the Innovation for Cleaner, Safer Vehicles webinar on understanding your vehicle interaction maturity and what you can do next. Just a little bit of housekeeping up front, first of all. As I said already, this will be recorded, so we'll be able to share this after the fact. Please keep yourself on mute during the webinar. Please also keep your videos off the webinar as well. That would really help us for the rest of the call to make sure we have the right bandwidth. So in terms of the webinar today, what I wanted to do, first of all, is just provide a bit of an introduction about the ICMM ICSV initiative. Then I'll just show you a little bit more information about the vehicle interaction maturity framework. The sort of the how, not the how-to, but a sort of start in the change discussion needed within vehicle interaction. Have a little bit of discussion about the link between EMESRT and ICSV, and then for the main part of the webinar, there'll be an EMESRT discussion on the background tools and approaches developed for undertaking a vehicle interaction implementation project. Next slide, please, Tony. Thanks. So I'm Mark Holmes. I'm safety manager, health and safety manager for ICMM. And in regards to the Innovation for Cleaner, Safer Vehicles initiative, it was launched back in 2018. It brings together 27 of the world's leading mining and metals companies, representing approximately 30% of the global market, with over 650 sites between them, and 19 participating original equipment manufacturers and technology providers, basically to collaborate in a non-competitive space to accelerate the development of a new generation of cleaner, safer mining vehicles. So the initiative will, our aim is that the initiative will benefit the entire mining industry and is open to all OEMs who would like to join as well. Thanks, Tony. So the ICSV initiative is currently working on 3 areas: greenhouse gas emission reduction, diesel particulate matter emission reduction, and also vehicle interaction. So why is it we've chosen vehicle interaction? Well, failure of vehicle interaction controls causes probably around 30 to 40% of industry fatalities. And in 2018, mobile equipment and transportation was the highest cause of fatalities for ICMM member companies, which is around 30% of fatalities in that year. And it's essentially an area that all mining companies, no matter the location or commodity, have a challenge with. So the ambition, therefore, of the ICSV initiative related to vehicle interaction is to promote collision avoidance technology capable of eliminating fatalities from vehicle interactions and available to mining companies by 2025. However, this is with recognition that technology on its own is not a silver bullet solution to this issue. Next slide, please, Tony. So in support of this ambition, a maturity framework is developed aimed at operational managers at operations. The intent of the framework is to map, motivate, and measure the intended status and journey for the vehicle interaction work stream. In addition, it will drive conversation amongst industry stakeholders to converge thinking, decision-making, and actions for the most effective use of technology and operational practices to meet the initiative's ambitions. Therefore, the maturity framework is designed to enable companies to move operations at their own industry-informed pace, provide a visual tool to assess progress at site against a collated company and industry level, provides insights on technology solutions already available or in development, and provides insights on leading practice, operational controls, and provides clear industry direction for OEMs and third-party innovation development. In other words, as I said before, it's not a how-to for implementing vehicle interaction projects, but a start in the change conversation needed at companies and operations. So I won't go into the detail of the maturity framework. It is available on the ICSV Knowledge Hub that you can reach through the ICMM website, www.icmm.com. But really just to note it and to provide some background and context, especially when it's referred to in today's session. However, this webinar is more about what you can do once you understand your current maturity. Next slide, please. Slide.
Thank you.
So today we'll be hearing from the Earth Moving Equipment Safety Roundtable, or EMESRT, from the team there about what you can do once you understand your VI maturity. So how does EMESRT actually fit into the ICSV initiative? Well, on the screen here, we have the ICSV collaboration model, which is formed of 3 layers: individual initiatives, industry partnerships, and the ICSV initiative itself. And also how it corresponds to the 4 strategic pillars that we have within the initiative, i.e. to form a common way of thinking across the industry, solve industry level issues, to consolidate intent and commitment, and promote industry adoption. So this model is useful as it helps create a safe space for dialogue, promote the understanding, but to send key messages across organisations like mining companies and actually make a change. It must be done at different decision-making levels and with the appropriate language for each, whether it's a CEO, site manager, or practitioners. And also to be clear on our boundaries, in this case to convene, to motivate, and to promote. And operating within an anti-competition environment means that we remain technology agnostic in our discussions. So EMESRT we see as being a partner in this work. I've been busy over many years on developing tools and approaches to help solve some of these industry level issues. I'll now hand over to Tony Egan from Glencore, who's going to help moderate a discussion with the EMESRT team about some of these additional tools and approaches that they've been developing. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Mark. Just a little housekeeping to begin with. We've got a lot of people online today, so in terms of questions, we're not going to have formal voice question stuff. If you could use the chat to type your questions or your comments as you go, with the team in the room with me here, we'll be monitoring the chat and highlighting to the presenters that we've got today, and we'll try and meld answers to your questions where we can. If we can't get to those today in the course of the call, we will be responding to those more formally after the meeting. And also, this is an opening webinar in relation to the body of work that we've got here that we've been collaborating with the ICMM and others. And there'll be an intent to run more webinars which are more topic specific, because there's a number of elements of this program that need to really be understood. It's not an easy issue, and we're going to run more of these over the coming months. So today is a broader picture. We see it as the next step after you've done the maturity framework. Where do you've recognised you want to do something? Where do you go from here? So I've got Ian Curran from BHP here, and Ian's going to speak in the first section on some things. And Ian's been on this journey of vehicle interaction with us since he's responsible for starting it. He walked in the door in 2013 and said to EMESRT, we've got a burning platform in this space and we need to do something about it. Matt Clements from Anglo American. Ian's with me in Brisbane. Matt's in Perth, and Matt's going to talk. Matt's the co-chair with me on this topic for EMESRT. We're the two that are trying to drive this forward in our group. And we've also got with us today Mike Boyle and Peter Standish, who've been working not only with the ICMM Knowledge Hub development, but also with the EMESRT Knowledge Hub development. And we're going to show you about where these materials and things live and how you might get to them. I've also got in the room with us Mark Gearson from Rio Tinto, who's an EMESRT advisory member and been involved in a number of topics. He's currently leading the fire fatality stuff. And we've got Eve McDonald in the room, and Eve's our EMESRT coordinator. So when you're getting in touch with us or doing things and having our meetings, she helps coordinate us. So there's 6 of us in Brisbane here, and Matt's in Perth. So starting on the Earth Moving Safety Roundtable, for those that don't know what we are, we were set up in 2006 to influence how OEMs design and build their products. That was the original intent, and it was around reducing health and safety in operating and maintaining activities. We've also focused on OEMs in the beginning, but what became really evident was that the understanding that we were trying to provide to OEMs was equally missing at times in our own users. And so we've ended up modifying some of our approaches over the years to provide support, and you'll see some of that today. So the members of IMESRT are the mining users, because the problems start with us. We decide to mine and we start buying equipment, and they end with us because we end up using this stuff every day. And there's a lot of parties in between, from researchers to third parties to the major OEMs that all get involved in that process at one point or another. So IMESRT embraces engagement with all of those parties. But there's been a couple of questions lately about IMESRT membership as things have gone on, and the members are the user companies, but we certainly engage widely. Our Vehicle Interaction Working Group, you'll see later, is quite large. I'll move on. You'll see it here, over 150 members are connected in our monthly calls and engagement calls that we do, and we also run formal workshops at different times on particular topics. And people like this we're on a call with last week, and they've had invites to today sent out through this process. It brings together a very wide spectrum of thinking and understanding, which is really what's needed to move these things forward. Technology here. So I said we started this back in 2013, and we worked on it for about 4 years, and we got to 2017, and we started to get a semblance of understanding of what is a really complex problem. And we put together this array, what we call an array diagram. You'll notice up in the top right corner that what was the goal that we established back in 2017, which was to get an innovation resource and methodology for systematic and practical improvement of vehicle interaction controls in mining. All those boxes that we identified, were pieces of the puzzle that lived within all of the different stakeholders in the industry and elements that needed to be addressed in some form. Some of it was identified that it didn't exist, and it wasn't in any group. And so IMESRT set about looking to see where we can fill those voids. Other things like standards and things already exist, and it was about how do we influence those things. So some of the work that's in here has been influencing, some of it's been direct engagement and development through IMESRT. So I'm going to ask Ian to talk a little bit about this, and I'm going to ask him a question now to commence on this. And that's, we've been working on this topic since 2013, Ian, and really, can you expand on the strategy approach?
Yeah, look, thanks, Tony. I'll talk a lot more about the left-hand side of the array diagram and the strategy that we're going through, and Tony will talk more around the industry collaboration piece as we go through the presentation. But as Tony said earlier on, in 2013, I walked into IMESRT. IMESRT was, we'd done a lot of work on access and egress and the main industry issues, and what was the next piece of work that we thought we should take on. And that was vehicle interaction. It was the burning platform. We started working through a lot of things. We looked at our design philosophies that you'll see up in the top left-hand corner, and where the design philosophies stood in the topic of vehicle interaction. And we learned a lot of pieces from that said the design philosophy, albeit very good, in the vehicle interaction space, needed more detail. It was a very complex problem, and we had to do a lot of work on it. So we worked on areas like the performance requirements PR5A document, which was the performance requirements around design philosophy 5, which was the main design philosophy that targeted vehicle interaction. So we went through a lot of those issues. I'll talk today predominantly about the nine-step model that we've built and how that has evolved from roughly 2015, when we sort of managed to get it to an agreed level that we thought we had it fairly right, to where it's moved to in 2020, 2021. This slide here, as I said, it's highlighted those areas. You'll see that the map has become a lot more simple from 2017 to 2020. We've managed to align the concepts, the streams, the work to get us in the direction of the strategy that we wanted to go to. So look, very clear, there's a lot of good information on the IMESRT website, and also the ICMM website that we'll go through later in the presentation. So I might get Tony to move on to the next one, and we'll talk about the key principles that have guided the IMESRT work to date. And it really started with a lot of people that got in the room, done a lot of conversations. There was no barrier to entry into vehicle interaction systems back in 2013, and anybody that had a GPS system or some form of technology said they had a collision avoidance system. We had to start building a model and start working out what the boundaries were, what the areas that we wanted people to work in, and what the messaging we could give was. The first piece of that work was around the potential unwanted events, or the PUEs, and EMESRT came up with 4. A lot of companies have come up with the first 3 and think that the first 3 are the only 3. EMESRT still believes that PUE 4 loss control is a very important part of the building of the 9-layer model, and also the building of the unwanted events that we are trying to mitigate. The early model in 2015, very vertical model, broken into 3 areas: design, operate, and react. And we had layers 1 and 2 in the design, 3 through 6 as operate, and 7 through 9 in react. And you can see that we've got the time frame from years through to milliseconds prior to an event happening. Now, certainly a foundation concept, and it showed that there was dynamic interdependence between the control levels. Each of those control levels actually worked on, there was different control categories that operate within different time frames. So you can see there quite clearly we've got, site requirements, segregation controls in the early phases of designing a mine. And as we move through to the react phase of 7, 8, and 9 in the early model, the intervention controls happen milliseconds prior to an incident happening. As we moved through the model and matured further, we moved the model from being a very vertical model to a horizontal model to try and get more clarity on the time, but also we moved the level 7 operator awareness from a react phase into the operate phase. We believe that the level 7 technology should be there in our standard operating methodologies, that we need to provide operators more awareness of what is around them and what is going on. And the react phase is certainly those advisory controls seconds before an incident, and the intervention controls milliseconds before that incident are very important. This dependency of moving the model to a horizontal model really shows the dependence on the real-time human factor decision making and the Mika-Ansley models, and we'll go into that in the next slide. Let me talk. So, as we've talked, Mika-Ansley was at the time the chief scientist for the US Air Force and very much a leader in the human factors world. She has since moved on from the Air Force and now works in the Pentagon as a key advisor on situational awareness and human factors. And you can see that the level 7 area lines up very well with the Ansley model in the middle, which is the environment, perception, comprehension, projection, decision, and action views that we have on a mining truck and the operator of a mining truck. That level 7 perception and comprehension is very much around those 1 through 7 or 4 through 7 scenarios of making sure that when the environment changes, there's perception and comprehension by the operator. Moving through that Ansley model, it aligns a lot with what we want to inform an operator, how we go about doing it, and certainly, what are the things that we need to do in that time-based sequence to avoid a collision from happening.
Thanks, Ian. That's not seeing any questions so far on the chat, so we might move on to the next section. So I'm going to throw a question at Matt now, and specifically the area that's highlighted in the map here. Matt, could you sort of expand on the relationship with ICMM that's evolved since 2017 in this workspace?
Absolutely, Tony. So EMESRT developed a plan over time. You saw from the previous slides that the work has evolved over time to really focus on what the solution needs to be in this space. And that work became the array diagram. So the picture on the screen you see now shows that it shows the journey that we've taken, and Ian spoke about the changes from when we first started through to the array diagram that you see in front of us now. The ICMM was identified as a conduit to work in parallel to develop the vehicle interaction solution, and I think it's really important that we mention the 4 slides that Mark Holmes went through at the start of the presentation. It gives a really good understanding of how that interaction takes place. But basically, ICMM is managing the overall vehicle interaction project with EMESRT and with technical support from EMESRT. And it's an innovation resource that supports the systematic and practical improvement of the vehicle interaction controls in mining. So when you look at the array diagram, it's basically broken down into 5 key areas. The area that, so the 5 key areas are the history and design philosophies. So where we started, the intervention controls, which Ian went through, design and operate controls, industry collaboration, and related industry activities. And you'll see that the area circled in the array diagram shows the interaction that we have with the ICSV or ICMM and the vehicle interaction project within ICMM. And then you'll also see on the right that there's more interaction with ICMM. So that gives you an indication of how the 2 groups work together.
Thanks, Matt. And this slide, I think, is about what we were trying to achieve back then. I think you'll see today it's more an electronic resource than a paper-driven one. But do you want to expand on this, mate? Or?
Yeah, so the Vehicle Interaction Control Improvement Guideline is a primary reference document. This document provides the overall objective to provide a consistent structured guidance for operating sites so that they can deliver projects that improve vehicle interaction controls. The guide was developed by combining approaches that have been applied at the ICMM member company operations to systematically improve vehicle interaction controls. This includes the operational integration of the new MEI controls. Expected users are site and divisional leaders with the business knowledge and experience to plan and deliver complex business improvement projects, because one of the things that we want to emphasize is we have chosen to use a project management framework to progress vehicle interaction work on any particular site. And the other thing that I'd mention is that the vehicle interaction control procedure is available on the EMESRT Vehicle Interaction Knowledge Hub, which will be discussed later on in this presentation. It's the internet website-based structure that Ian mentioned previously.
Thanks, Matt. Probably the good burning question for today was mentioned. How does the maturity framework link into this work? And I'll just let you start explaining that. I think people will be interested to see how that connection's made. Yeah,
so I spoke about the project management methodology in the previous slide, and the slide that you see in front of you now gives you an indication of how we mapped out that project. So we created what we call the work breakdown structure. It has 6 key objectives. You'll see the 6 boxes across the top. First is project management, and this is the key. We believe that in order to effectively implement the vehicle interaction solution, that you need to run it as a project. And the second box is the vehicle interaction control framework baseline, and this is probably the most important part of the entire, I suppose, project management aspect of the business, because we understanding exactly your current state is the key to determining what the gaps are and how you intend to close those gaps using, the other 4 boxes in this work breakdown structure. And those other 4 boxes being, existing control effectiveness. So how you work out what your baseline is, you determine how effective the controls are that you already have in place. Box number 4 is the existing vehicle control enhancement. So what can you do to enhance the controls that you currently have to give better coverage and better effective control of the risks? And number 5 is the new vehicle control implementation. So, the gaps that exist, how and what are you going to use to close those gaps, and how are you going to implement them, and basically run a project on those. And then the last one is mine of the future, digitalization. If we go to the next slide, Tony, it gives a more detailed understanding, and it shows how the work breakdown structure expands out. So it's not just something that we developed that has a bunch of headers that give you an indication on how to run a project. There's a lot of detail associated with this. So the maturity framework is the way to start, and we saw that in the slides that Mark Holmes completed in the beginning. And the beginnings of it starts the project out. It gives you an indication of where you currently sit, and where you need to be to get to a point where you're covering the issues associated with vehicle interaction. And it's the key aspect that helps determine an operation's current state. It's a critical component to the change management associated with this, and that's obviously a very detailed aspect of the work breakdown structure. All of this stuff is available on the Knowledge Hub that we're going to discuss very soon, and it'll be demonstrated later on in the presentation. But the point of this slide is just to highlight the fact that there's a lot more detail associated with the work breakdown structure that's been generated to help sites complete a project on vehicle interaction and get a good result.
Thanks, Matt. I mean, you mentioned about doing the baseline. Is there an underlying premise for how you do that? Can you maybe take us through that?
Yeah, so I think, I mentioned it in the previous slide, but the baseline effectiveness forms part of the work breakdown structure. So you'll see under the project management or box number 1 associated with the work breakdown structure, that is basically determining what your box number 1 and 2 are basically determining what your baseline is for the entire project. So, in the project management phase, it's the maturity assessment. And then in the second phase, it's all based on determining what your current state is. And if you don't understand your current state well, you can't do any of the other aspects of the work breakdown structure effectively. It's basically the first step in project management. And then this slide, it's basically a simple flowchart. It shows how you establish the baseline effectiveness for existing controls for normal operations. And it considers the control independencies of the level 1 to 9 model that Ian Curran ran through. And it helps to confirm and optimize the existing controls. So you consider control level interactions and control independencies, and you make a decision on how you move through this flowchart. But it introduces and integrates design and technology controls that will improve your current practice, replace your current practice, or consider controlled independencies and things like, ineffective change can introduce new risks, for example. So it very much focuses on the change management aspect. And the order is critical. I think one of the key points associated with this presentation are that a lot of people looking for the silver bullet, are looking for some technology that they can implement that will fix all of their problems. But what we've realized that if the technology is activated, then we've failed in the level 1 to 7 controls. If our people, put themselves in the line of fire, then we may have to activate the technology. The whole point of the exercise is to really harp on the levels 1 to 7 to make sure that people don't activate the technology. And when we get to that state, I think that would be deemed as success.
Thanks, Matt. That's really an overview, I suppose, so far of the sort of conceptual ideas and things. We've just got an example now of where we've laid out some specific scenarios. One of the challenges in this is when you talk to the designers is the ability to give them functional and performance requirements that can actually then be put into practice. In general, I think it's fair to say as an industry, we've not been very good at that in this space. And in the recent times, through some collective work, we pulled together what we call the storyboards, but we've just got 2 examples of really quite significant situations that we know have been fatally involved in the past. These are an interactive thing that sort of set out the scenario. So if you read PR5A, there's what I call the two-dimensional scenarios. We've taken them a bit further into this sort of three-dimensional space that now really gives you a functional requirement here for a particular scenario, and also the performance requirements. Now, they might vary for your operation, but in general, these have been shared widely through all of the companies within IMESRT and through the industry. And the feedback so far is, well, actually, we've all got pretty similar issues that we're dealing with. And the storyboards actually haven't, no one's come back with any modifications. We've had a request from one company to add a couple, which was related to a downhill hauling fatality incident, and we've added a couple in for that. But there's about 26 or 27 of these discrete scenarios. And the ability to deal with these quite specifically is pretty important when you want to try and get rid of nuisance alarming. And when I use the word nuisance alarm, I mean anything that's not contextual to the operator. False positive, false negative, positive, positive, doesn't matter. If it's not contextual to the operator, you get normalization effect, and ultimately people ignore it when you really need them to actually use it. That was the T intersection one. Unfortunately, in Glencore, we had a fatality in that situation. Another pretty common activity is light vehicles trying to get near heavy vehicles. And in the past, the way we've done that is using radio traffic and calling each other, and anybody that's actually been on active mine site knows how difficult that can be. Using this approach, it sets out a mechanism by which you can use the screen and you use the system to talk between the vehicles and confirm things. And one of the key confirmations is the gaining of a safe state. So in this case, it was 0 speed, park brake on, and in neutral. And only then can the call from the light vehicle says, I want to come in, but only then can the heavy vehicle actually respond once those safe states are met. The other thing it does is it date and time stamps the activity, which we currently aren't able to do in monitoring the current controls that we have. So this sort of starts to fit into that level 5 activity that Matt was talking about. It's more than just improving your underlying controls that you've got now. This is replacing the controls that you've got now. So that's just a couple of those. There's quite a few, and they're accessible off the Knowledge Hub as well, which we're going to show you a little bit later on. So this next piece here.
Look, Tony, I think on that, the Knowledge Hub. What is the IMESRT VI Knowledge Hub, and how can it help the industry users and designers to progress forward?
Well, really, what we've tried to do is build it's a journey in terms of this approach. So I'll just bring up the little slide that shows that. The navigation approach we've taken is this one of a journey, because everyone's starting at different points. And linking back to the maturity framework approach that we've been working with ICMM on, is really starting to set the positions where people are coming from. When you do your maturity framework, it actually starts to give you an insight into where do you want to be on this journey. You might be starting right at the beginning, and so there's some materials in there that will help you actually at the start of that, and then you might be further on, like down at where we want to change, and you might be wanting to start setting up the project, so you'll get into the work breakdown structure of things. So the tools are available for multiple levels in different places, but hopefully it gives a bit of a filter. So rather than just looking at a directory structure and trying to find out what you need, we're trying to give people a bit of guidance. I'm going to change out of the presentation now and actually go into the hub for a second. As usual, doing these sorts of things can be dangerous, but I'm going to give it a go. Share the thing. Doing that and share this. Okay, coming back up. No, good stuff. It worked. So this is the front page of the ICMM Knowledge Hub. This is so it looks very similar to ours. There's links and everything in there. I've just got to go backwards. I've left myself in the wrong spot. This one. There we go. So this is the IMESRT Knowledge Hub. So they're not too dissimilar in the approach, given that the constructors were similar people. If you go onto the IMESRT Knowledge Hub and go down, you can click on that link there. It takes you into the hub piece that we've been talking about. Here's the navigation approach. If you hover over things, it'll tell you what the different elements are. And if you click into them, I'll go into this last one about what we should change. it starts to give you a bit of an overview and understanding of what's in there. And if you scroll down, one of the key elements in that change is, as Matt mentioned, was running a project. So this will take you in and a bit more about the work breakdown structure. And then actually you can click on the view the resource and it brings it up. And if you just hover over each of the boxes, it actually gives you guidance in there. And there's also some detail when you click on, say, section 1 here. It starts to scroll down and give you the different elements of section 1. And as I mentioned earlier, here's the connection to the maturity framework. So if you click on this, it will also take you through to the ICMM website and to the maturity framework. So I don't really want to go too much further. I mean, we just wanted to introduce it and show you what it was about. Matt also mentioned earlier there about the guide, and I'll just view the result, click that on.
It's a foundation document, start there.
Yeah. So on that slide earlier it showed it, but here you can see this is a document that you can use within your business if you want to talk to people about the overall approach. And there's some pretty detailed flowcharting here about moving through, phase 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, more discrete steps. So at this point, we've actually got through this a lot quicker than we thought we were going to. So I might just maybe open the chat line up. Have we seen much, Steve, at this time?
Oh, only generic stuff at the moment.
There's a question about underground storyboards. Perhaps you'd like to comment.
Yeah, okay. The underground storyboard is a good point. The storyboards were developed off the back of actual projects, and so the underground group have gone through their baseline. There's a number of sites have done that, and they're working to pull the storyboards together. It's a work in progress. One of the gentlemen, Jonathan Keys, who helped us with the surface storyboards, is also helping the guys because it's being done out of North America, those ones, the undergrounds, and hopefully we'll get them available. There's a number of other activities that we're still undertaking, and with that, I might go to the array diagram. I'll go back to the presentation for a second. So let me click on that.
Can I just make a quick point, Tony? Yeah. The Knowledge Hub is constantly being curated, and so after the presentation, if you land on it, step 1 of our journey model is less tidy right now than it will be tomorrow. So. It works, but we're constantly uploading and cross-linking. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, Mike.
And Tony, if you could just explain to the audience what a storyboard is, please.
Okay, I'll go back again. I might go back a couple of slides. There we go. So the storyboards were premised off the original set of scenarios that we published in PR5A back in 2015. There's 24 surface scenarios. And they were what I call two-dimensional. They didn't really give you any depth of understanding. They were a nice picture, and we thought people could use them. But the reality is, without a depth of more clarity on the actual function that's required within that scenario, and also the performance parameters, distance, speed, all those sorts of things, the designers actually struggle. So through a collective exercise with some good people in the industry, we've had designers and we've had users right the way down to truck drivers and other people in the room together. And these storyboards were formed out of trying to derive a set of functional and performance requirements. Although they were done in one particular project, we've shared them freely because pretty much either someone's going to break it on you, which is good, you'll learn early, or they'll align with it and enhance it. And as I said earlier, so far the alignment has been really strong, and a lot of support and approach for this. And what it's leading to, and ultimately what IMESRT is trying to do, is get a common understanding of a problem, which allows designers to then commit to spending some money on progressing their product with some surety that there's a common market out there. Because if we're all splintering in different directions, which is where we've been, you're not really going to get any great progression of investment in design change, and we really do need that change. Let's click on that.
A couple of things there that we've worked through, Tony. That's probably there's a question there about linkage to autonomous mining.
So I might just talk to the linkage to autonomous haulage. I think the work that we've done from the start in 2013, we've been very much collaborative with the OEMs and the designers of vehicle interaction systems. The knowledge that we learned through this journey will certainly dovetail into autonomous haulage systems. The scenarios are more controllable in an autonomous world, but the scenarios still certainly can exist, and therefore the autonomy has got the ability to deal with those scenarios knowing what they are. And so this work will only make the autonomous systems more powerful. Some of the other work we've done with the ISO committees in raising work around standard interface protocols for vehicle interaction systems is certainly in its infancy, and those standards are in the process of being published. And building on those will allow us to build further into the autonomous haulage systems as well. As we define the standards and those interaction protocols, hopefully as we move forward and the industry matures, the autonomous systems will pick up some of this work and allow us to move more smoothly to transition from the manned world to a manned autonomous world and into a fully autonomous world.
Thanks, Ian. Any other questions we're seeing coming through?
There's a bit there about the functional safety. Did you want to just talk a little bit about that? Because there was some confusion about where that applies and where it doesn't apply.
So, yeah, thanks, Mike. We've done a bit of work in this space, and it's not something we put up on the EMESRT site yet, but we went through and looked at, people were saying you had to have SIL levels on things, and there was a whole great debate around that. What we actually went and did was actually looked at how to build a framework approach to this. And the first part of that was we said, well, we were at level 8, so we were advising the operator. We're not taking control. As everyone knows, level 9 is where the machine intervenes. And we looked at 19014, which is the new standard that's been put out by ISO around functional safety for mining equipment. We looked at 61508, which everybody references around the place, which is the sort of overarching standard around that sort of thing. And we also looked at MDG 2007, which was a document published many years back that is more a risk assessment flowchart methodology that was put together by an industry group and involved the regulators in New South Wales, but it's been used widely outside of New South Wales. We used all three approaches and came up with the same answer, which was that you don't need to do SIL at level 8, but what you do need to do is follow good engineering practice. So what does that mean? Well, when you read the standards, that means conducting an approach that has a safety systems approach, so not just looking at functional safety, which is the widgets, safety systems approach, looking at the overarching thing. The interesting bit when we mapped it all back was, having done the baseline and the other activities that we did, we've actually got the systems safety approach covered. And it very much the functional, the baseline is like a maturity, an FMEA, failure modes effects analysis, which is referenced in the standard as good engineering practice. So up to level 8, you don't have to do SIL from what we've worked out so far, but you do need to have a good structured approach with an engineering background. And this methodology that we've put up today absolutely supports that for all three different angles. If you go to level 9, there is going to be some elements of that, and that piece of work is about to be gone through. We looked at doing the baseline approach with up to level 8, and in the subsequent months, we're going to actually look at the level 9 piece and try to unravel it. But it's interesting, you get people saying, oh, I've got to do SIL. Well, SIL's just one approach to this stuff. It's an outcome versus you need a structured approach using the standards to look at where it is and what it is and how exposed you are and what might be your response. And I think, again, I think the industry has been led by some learned consultants and others, but as we need to educate ourselves and actually start to make some decisions for ourselves around this and get a better level of understanding.
Yeah. So to arrive at that, we pulled together a white paper and
in the ICMM group, yes,
that's
right?
right,
Yeah,
that's right. And we collaborated and syndicated widely with standards groups and interested parties to arrive at where we are.
And certainly that's a good example of that collaborative level work, because the white paper was done at the ICMM level.
That's right.
But that lower, more detailed work's being done through the MS group.
Yeah. Look, Tony,
because our OEMs wanted clarity as well.
And Tony, I think could you just within the collaboration piece, the work that's been done with ACARP as well around the testing, the testing procedures and protocols.
Yeah, one of the things we identified, as you know, Ian, early on was that two things. One, there was no standard interface when we talked about, talking about technology between machines. So third-party products and OEM machines, there was no standard interface. There was in automotive, Navy, the marine, aircraft, trains. So the work that EMESRT helped facilitate between the third parties and the OEMs the last few years has resulted in the ISO 21815, which provides a standard common interface that people can design to that will give flexibility when we're on our mine sites. So that's one piece of work. And the other piece of work that was identified was that there's actually no agreed testing methodology. And there's been some great work done by Herman Hemmersma and the guys at the University of Pretoria. And a recent ACARP project was funded, included collaboration between those guys and a team at University of Queensland. And there's a report about to be published on a standard methodology, which through the course of that project, we ran a number of major workshops that involved the working group attendees from the Vehicle Interaction side. There's a question up on the screen at the moment about, is EMESRT focused on technologies levels 7 to 9, or we produce detailed guidelines on design and operating best practices? We're not probably going to do that. We're certainly trying to provide some help in the 7, 8, 9 space. But what we presented earlier on in terms of the work breakdown structure, going into doing the baseline, and also then following the control framework approach, those things lead you to interrogate your underlying controls. And what we've really generally found where people have done the baseline is what I call our tribal knowledge. Our understanding of what to do as an industry is actually pretty strong, and we're not finding anything new, but we're finding lots of ways of how it's implemented poorly. It's not implemented at all, but it's known about in the industry. And in a lot of cases, it's not monitored very well. So we write something and say, you must follow and do this, and we train people in it, but we actually have no triggers or mechanisms for that monitoring that says we're drifting away from what was required. And if we actually were able to stay in what was required, we'd probably get the right result. So there's a very heavy emphasis, and Ian talked before about the level 7 being part of that day-to-day operation. The technology that helps us do better what we do now is picking up that drift. So things like the fatigue technology that we've got out there now, that deals with loss of control events. And again, Ian mentioned the loss of control piece. Light vehicle speed monitoring and driver behaviour has greatly reduced the exposures that we've had and the loss of control events. So there's technology that can help us in that upstream piece. But we're not going to sit here and publish how you run your mine. I think once you interrogate your own systems and where you identify gaps, talk to others, and that's certainly, there's a lot of sharing goes on through the group. But yeah, we're not here to publish standards and guidelines per se.
And look, just on the question by Anna around the integrated with sleepiness or fatigue, certainly the level 5 within the model, the 9-layer model, really is that piece around operate and fatigue and fitness to operate. What is the fatigue state and how do we manage that? So absolutely, there is the level 5 around fatigue is far a far more readily achievable piece and should be addressed early on in the piece rather than moving straight to a level 8 or 9 system.
And we've seen some people who've followed that path, and their statistics, which they're their own company ones, we can't share them publicly, but what we've seen is that they've seen a great reduction in exposure and in loss of control events and not getting to that point of collision. We've got another question here from Sylvie around, how do we see collaboration between miners, EMESRT, ICMM and others continuing now that we've got moving from the conception of the WBS to the execution of it? I suppose if we're all starting to use a common methodology and a common approach, we're going to start to align on our thinking, and we're going to start to see some common specifications, if you will, going out. I think designers are going to see that the industry is asking for the same thing, and therefore they're going to get some surety of investment. That if they build the best mousetrap, then we're probably going to buy it. And I mean, none of what we're doing here is trying to stop innovation and leapfrogging, because we need to see that. but certainly, and we're not going to be into certifying or those sorts of things. I mean, what we want to do is provide the information and let the market do its work.
I think also, yeah, providing that common language to the developers and designers is certainly an important piece, and the collaboration allows for us to build that common voice, the common language, so that when we do go, we're not going individually, we are going as a collaborative mining organisation.
Just a question from the sideline. The phase 1 and phase 2 of the work breakdown structure are about baselining and understanding your baseline as documented, and then testing it with operationally experienced people to check that work is done matches work is documented. That's a key step. Can you take us through a little bit of that, please?
Yeah, the key difference, I suppose, in this baseline approach is we're not running a risk assessment. We're not going into a room having a voyage of discovery. We're basically, when you run the baseline, you capture what the sites say they do now. So in Mike's terminology, as documented. And then you actually bring people into the room and validate that approach. And one of the key questions is, don't tell me what I want to hear, what you think I want to hear, tell me what I need to know. And that is, we've written it this way in our systems. Does it actually happen that way? Or it happens, but how does it drift away from good performance? Can you tell us that? And it really starts to give you some interesting insights, because if you've got this delta between work as documented versus work as done, then you're probably living in a zone of risk that you don't want to be in. So this slide here, which we hid before because we didn't think we'd have the time, but when you run the baseline, it's a very simple thing. You're asking 3 questions. What's the required state that you're trying to achieve? So in this case, it's speed's appropriate to the conditions, maintain clearance, give way, park correctly. When you look at the incident data and the underlying approach of how we get it wrong, they're the areas that sort of collectively show where we should be looking. And once you understand that, you can actually say, well, how do I not get that thing? And you could call it credible failure modes, erosion factors. There's lots of different terminology in the industry, but ultimately, it's how do we not achieve that operating state? And in one of the baselines that I've seen, the clearance side of things, there were 19 credible failure modes in relation to clearance, on a mine site, a surface mine site, and which all of these business inputs, which is the bottom, which really the business input box that's the stuff we do every day. This is where we specify and we implement and monitor, and the things that our people do. And I'll just flick over. Here's an example of the sort of complexity we were talking about before. There's 13 required operating states that have been identified. And of those is sort of these 5 groupings with 81 credible failure modes. And they've been cross-checked against 700 incidents. So there's been a lot of validation, both at a workshop level, but also with incident data. And down the bottom there, the business input areas sort of tend to fall into those 6 groups as well. What you find when you do this and lay it all out, there's tentacles of things that live in all different sorts of documents within your management systems. And in the words of one of the guys that was involved in the early piece of this, he said, Tony, we're not looking at anything new here. We're just looking at it with a different lens that we've had before. And it's given us great clarity that the people on the shop floor can understand. So when the truck drivers and the mechanics and those guys were involved in these validation workshops, they really readily got it. What else have we got on the question board there? What's that? Yeah. So we've got a bit to finish up, I think.
This one here.
Yeah, we get out of here.
There's a question there from Ben. Do state governments recognise how the work breakdown structure integrates with their legislation?
They're starting to.
Yeah.
We had a session yesterday on the tyres side of things using this methodology, and we had
several regulators
in the room, and they were really encouraged, and it certainly made them challenge their thinking. So, yeah. But I might just, the time's got away from us. But in conclusion, the IMESRT approach is based on system level understanding, some engineering logic, because you're taking on an engineering exercise, wide engagement, and it focuses on outcomes. The storyboard's a good example of that. What's the outcome you're looking for? In 2021, we after 7 years in this space, thanks to Ian, we're getting down to delivery phase of some what we think is stuff that can help everyone in all facets of the industry. Is it full yet? No, there's more work to be done, and I'll show you in a second about some of the other things we're going to be doing. But ultimately, we've got to, these projects are complex. They need to be managed, coordinated, and collaborated on as many moving parts. And we keep hearing about there's no silver bullets. There's lots of examples where people have fitted this technology, not looked at their underlying controls, and yes, they've got some outcomes, but what we've also seen is incidents that have occurred because people get normalised to either over-alarming, there's blind spots in the situation. We really haven't considered all of the aspects. So, good engineering practice is about starting from that thing. And, all of us have these change management policies in our business. And I hear a lot of people tell me where they want to go. But I think the first step in change management is well, what am I moving from? In other words, what's the problem? And we seem to be missing that at times. And so a lot of this work is focused on helping you get that. And finally here, the array diagram that we started with, it's really pleasing to say that updated as of this month, we've got a lot of green boxes in there. And so we've actually, we think this year is a year of delivery. And the ones that are still brown, the top box here, B5, that's the control framework. So we're trying to provide a generic, I suppose, set of stuff that's come out of a lot of the learnings of different individual projects around the control framework that people can use. Linked in with that will be a self-assessment review tool that allows you to sort of set up for your baseline work. And they're not far off. We hope to get them out in the first quarter of this year. The guide for preparation and delivery of a baseline is also going to be done in concert with that stuff as well. So those three will turn green. The good practice case studies up here on the right, we've got a few case studies, and some of those were built back in 2017 under the Queensland Resources Council project, and they're published already. But there's more to come, and we're currently finishing one on a good fatigue project that's really been seen as a leading example of installing a fatigue management system, not only the technology, but its integration back into all of the people systems and the behaviour controls. Down at the bottom here, the research piece, obviously we'll continue to work with the research groups, and the stakeholder engagement, that's probably going to ramp up this year. That's why it's not green, because really, this webinar and subsequent webinars will be probably broadening the depth of that stakeholder engagement. And we'd encourage yourselves to, this will be taped, or it has been taped today, but in terms of future webinars, they're going to be quite specific around doing baselines and things. So we'd encourage that get your people who want to be exposed to that directly, and we'll see if we can provide some help in what's an interesting and difficult journey.
And look, I think the other piece on that one, Tony, is any support from the mining companies, in helping us frame this work and do this work is always greatly appreciated. There are limited resources everywhere, and the work done by EMESRT to date has been a labour of love for a fairly large chunk of people, but certainly the more that collaborate in this would make make things go faster and easier. So please look at this information. If you want more, please reach out to ICMM and EMESRT to help us work through this work.
Yeah, I think there's also a question there around the regulator in South Africa, but I think I wanted to sort of talk to Dr. Herman and the University of Pretoria and how we've collaborated in terms of proximity detection validation framework, just quickly, because that helps sort of.
I think, Mark, it's probably not for us to comment specifically about a regional issue, other than to say that there's people who sit on the Mine Safety Advisory Group in South Africa, as we have in other regions, and they've certainly leveraged some of this information to work with the regulator in South Africa to look at the implementation of the decreed level 9 and to understand the intricacies and the challenges that presents, and there's certainly been a few. And I think that's an ongoing discussion. So I don't think Roy Murley's with us today, and Roy's one of those members. I think he'll be on the call this afternoon, but I think it's probably as far as we can go with that discussion.
I just wanted to close it out.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Got another quick question here. One of the looks like one of the third-party providers, market technology suppliers and OEMs need to do their thing. And how does EMESRT and ICMM and its members expect engagement and interaction with the solution providers once the product requirement documents firmly determined. I think the engagement's going to come by individual companies putting out requests for proposals, and that's going to give you guys an insight into that. I think none of us can tell each other's companies what to do, and it's all about how we learn from each other. But the more commonality about our approaches to suppliers is going to build that momentum in that space. It's not about publishing a standard around the performance requirements. It's about each company taking that stuff on. The other thing is that at an ICSV level, the ICMM group, you can participate in those forums, and we do. We have a number of the people online today are in third-party providers, OEMs, and even individual people who have knowledge within the industry. Some who were involved in companies and are still outside of those. So there's no barriers to entry. And as Ian said earlier, the collective diversity of thinking and approach is what is going to move us all forward. And we're never so bold to say best or anything else. There's only ever something that's leading at a given point in time, and hopefully it gets leapfrogged and improved. And that's look, thank you for your time today. I might just throw back to Mark to close out.
Many thanks, Tony. Many thanks, EMESRT team. Yeah, really appreciate your time, and thanks everyone as well for all your questions. If we haven't got around to your question, we'll be able to respond as well by email. As I said, the recordings will be made available. We have another session later on today or tomorrow morning, depending where you are in the world. But otherwise, yeah, we'll get this information out to you. Tony mentioned that we're thinking about attending or setting up other webinars. If you've applied for this webinar, you'll also get the invites for the other webinars going forward. The other thing that we're thinking of doing is also sending out a very short survey out to participants, just to get a sense of where, what sort of thing or what sort of specific topics you might have heard today that you'd like to explore, or like EMESRT themselves to explore a bit further. So yeah, really appreciate that. Okay, so that's everything for this call today. Thank you very much for your time, and as I say, we'll be back in touch. Thank you, everyone.
Travel safe, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone.